Okay, so welcome everyone to my talk. I just said my day is going at a level 2 from 1 to 10, mainly because when you're managing teams, there are some days which are absolutely manic because your days are full of meetings. And some days when you have that half an hour, 1 hour of time, you're actually thinking of what do I do with this time? Because I have far too much work to do. As you can see, there's some post-its behind me, which encompasses a lot of the work I do. Right. So a little bit about myself first. My name is Maryam Umar. I'm head of quality engineering at Thought Machine, which is a fintech in London. The product we have is a core banking system, which is basically aiming to help the banking industry move forward in the cloud domain in terms of their core functionalities. If any one of you have worked in banks, basically what happens is that they have different systems for, say, account management, transactions, and products. But really the problem, I'm sorry for that noise because my cat's running around. And it's really hard for banks to upgrade to new pieces of software if they want to. A little bit about my career. I started about 14 years ago now as a hands-on tester in a small, what we now call fintech firm. And very quickly, I think within a month or two, I realized I don't want to be doing repetitive manual testing. I want to make better use of my time. So I quickly moved into automation, test automation. And from there on, I worked in a variety of companies from e-commerce, restaurant booking, travel, and so on. But after about 10 years, I realized that I wasn't getting the guidance that I needed in order to progress my career and learn more because I was in the field of QA. So I made a conscious decision to move into the world of management. And I will talk a little bit more about my journey there in the next few minutes. Something I didn't know when I went into management is that whereas it is extremely intense, it's extremely rewarding at the same time. When you become a manager or a leader, as I would like to say, I think it's important to talk about the difference between management and leadership here. Management really is mostly about, okay, you're setting up people's objectives, you're doing the salary reviews, you're creating plans, etc. But leading is about enabling people to move forward and actually motivating them and inculcating in them a desire to actually do better and push their own boundaries. And when you actually have people in your teams who do something like that, it's extremely rewarding. Something I learned as well is that when you become a middle or non-exec team, exec level style manager, you actually have to learn to take a backseat. You can't be at the forefront actually saying that this is what I am doing. You have to lead through your people. You have to enable them to move forward. You have to create the opportunities for them so that their work is what takes your team forward. Something I've learned as well as part of being a quality engineering manager is also that sometimes you have to create a space where, let's say, you're discovering more defects in the team. And the feedback you'd get as a manager is that there's something wrong with the quality of the product. We're finding far too many defects. My counter argument to that is that it's not that it's a failure that we're finding too many defects. It's a success that we are finding defects and not our customers. And that's where the impact is that you're bringing to the business via your team. And it's very important to think about these things as you go forward. Today, I want to talk about a few things that I really wish I knew when I started into management as a role and leading as a role. And I hope I can talk about some tools and experiences which people can learn from. Some things I've learned is that when you become a manager, initially, you forget about yourself. In terms of you forget to take time out for yourself, you forget to have proper lunch breaks. time management becomes something which is extremely important for us to do. How do you make sure that you're building people? How do you make sure you're also having to make strategies for the entire organization, for your team? How do you make sure that you're still learning about the product as well, that you still have your hands dirty in some way or the other? And it's a lot of plates that you have to spin if you look at it. And this is just scratching the surface of what you need to do as a manager. I'm going to now share some stories. Please don't be upset by some of the things I'm going to share, because I feel that what people don't do is that nobody shares what were the difficult points in your management journey. And I feel it's very important to discuss those. One thing I learned the very hard way was that you should always document everything when it comes to people management. And I'm not talking about this in a negative light. I think it also works in a positive light. And when I was first managing, I had this situation where I had a person in the team who wanted extreme flexible working hours. And by extreme, I mean, they said, I want to change my working hours from 7:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. because I want to be at home when I get and I'm actually helping them sit through an exam for qualifying for a specific type of school. The mistake I made there was that I was very empathetic towards their situation, which is also not a negative thing to do, but I'll talk about that in a bit. What happened was I actually went back and forth to get their approval because my concern was that they will end up missing a lot of team ceremonies. As we know in agile teams, most teams actually do things like planning sessions or retros towards the end of the day rather than in the mornings. So she was going to end up missing all of these ceremonies. And I said, how will you make sure that your feedback's already there? And she said, don't worry, I'll make sure I follow up in writing. I leave my comments. And I was like, okay, fine. You trust your team, right? I had to actually speak to a lot of engineering managers and heads of departments to actually make sure that she had this flexibility, and we put it in place. About 3-4 weeks later, the scrum master of her team pinged me and he said, what's going on with X? I was like, what do you mean? It's like, they're not in team ceremonies. I was like, yeah, because this is what was happening. And I informed you that they will do different working times, which they were okay with. But what happened was that the agreement we had on the timing, they were never in by 8:30 even. They were coming in later and they were leaving early. And I personally don't have a problem with the timings, but the output was changing as well. So I held them accountable. I had a conversation with them that this is the report I'm getting. I don't like to micromanage, but this is what I'm being told. What's going on there? And they didn't have an answer. And what was sad to see that because I hadn't followed up in writing that this is what we'll do, they actually unfortunately took advantage of a manager trusting them. And eventually the good conclusion was that this didn't have to go through HR or anything. The good conclusion was that they themselves realized that they're not being honest to their team in terms of their contributions. And it would be at the detriment of the team for them to be in the team. So they made an exit from the company, and very respectfully so. On the flip side, when things do go bad, I actually had another person in the team who was pushing for a promotion. They were quite a senior member of the team. And the reason I think that was stopping them was that they were lacking soft skills. The more you progress at the technical level in your career, the more you should also be able to mentor people and actually provide guidance and help other people build technically as well. And this is what they were lacking. Nobody in the team wanted them to be themselves to be mentored by this person because of the way they would communicate and so on. So I said to them, yes, of course, we can work on a promotion, but these are the pieces that are missing. And I assigned them some courses in our learning and development software, and they never took those courses on. And lo and behold, 6 months later, it's performance review time, and they don't get a promotion, which means they don't get a pay rise, at which they were outraged. They're like, this is not right. You played a game with me, etc., etc. And it got really ugly. The mistake I made there was I did not follow up in writing that these are the objectives we agreed on, and this is what you need to achieve. You never write down, you never put down in writing things like, if you do this, I'll promote you. You should write down what people's objectives are and follow up and make sure they respond to those emails. And because I did not do that, this spiraled into a 7-month HR review, which was really upsetting for me and for them. They stopped speaking to me. My objectives got impacted as a result. So lesson learned was, whenever you feel like people in your team are not clear on their objectives or the goals are not there, even if it's in terms of sticky notes or whatever. Now I always make notes for my one-to-ones in a bad way, in a good way, and it just helps me go forward. So lesson learned is please, please, please always document so that you have the data to prove when things go wrong or go well. Another mistake I did was that I always looked into people's progression only initially. And this was a result of the experience I went through when I was hands-on automation engineer. The challenge I had then was that my tech lead at the time didn't know what to do to help me progress. And that's something which was very important to me. So when I became a manager, the first thing I did was I automatically just started focusing on what opportunities to create so people in my team can move forward. I was quite lucky that we had a very well-defined career framework, so I could actually choose from those from the ideas in there as to what to put into people's objectives and work very aggressively towards that area. But the impact of doing this only was that people did not see my function or my contribution as a whole to the organization or to the wider engineering team, because all I was doing was focusing on people progression only. A lot of companies have a cap of, let's say, every manager should be able to manage up to 6 people or up to 8 people, which is a lot of your time, because at the end of the day, it's something which is which really impacts people's lives, which is why I just started spending a lot of time on it. But what I didn't realize was that I wasn't doing anything on a wider scale. I had to broaden my remit. Which brings me to my next very important thing. And I think if some people from my team are here right now, it's very important to create a team vision. I think the challenge is that when you become a manager, you just need to think about what is it that the goal of the entire team is, whether it's a 3-people team or a 10-people team or a 100-people team. Creating a vision and bringing it back to the organization's vision really helps you focus on what is it that will make you successful. But then the caveat here is don't create the vision yourself. You could go in and create a vision statement yourself, but then pitch it to the team and ask for feedback. I understand sometimes it's really hard to get consensus on the ideas we want to work on together, but that's why sometimes as a manager, you just need to go in and say, right, this is what we're going to work with. I need feedback on this, or can we improve this in some way? And that's how you want to go forward. And then you want to run sessions with your team to make sure that they're engaged and really understand what's the value you're bringing to the organization. And then you want to make sure that people's objectives match with that vision. Creating a vision is a small thing. Implementing the vision is the biggest task. And this is something I really struggle with even today. What happens is that, especially when you are working on things like, let's say, product delivery or quality assurance, which are like a supporting framework to the organization, the technical capabilities of a team as a whole, it sometimes gets sidestepped. And that's where it's important to make sure that you actually have ideas which help you implement things to improve quality of your product day to day. Sometimes what can also happen is that when you create a vision and you have goals defined, it may not get prioritized. And that's where transparency is really important. I am part of a peer of other engineering directors at my current organization. And there are things I learn about our clients and our journey for our products, which my team doesn't hear of. And I feel it's really, really important to make sure that I share that information with my team. Because the more transparent you are, the more they will understand why priorities keep differing all the time. So for example, we've had to sign off, I think, 4 patch releases in the past 3 days, including our current release. And that can completely derail people from doing work towards their objectives or implementing quality as part of our vision. And that can be very frustrating for people that, oh, let's say I wanted to learn Cypress as a testing framework and implement it as part of this release cycle, and it's completely derailed. Why has that happened? And so on. And in order to help people not get too frustrated, it's important that I brought the information to them that why do we need these patch releases? What is the impact on the client? And what can we gain during those patch releases to make sure? And as part of my job in being transparent to them is also taking information from them back to the department heads, saying, because we chose to do these 4 patch releases, as an example, the impact is that the implementation of the Cypress framework will be pushed out to another 6 months. And that's the value we're losing or impact we have on, say, a regression testing cycle. It's very important to articulate things like that in terms of impact. When it comes to defining a vision, something I used and found really useful was making use of the MOST framework. The MOST framework is, as you can see, it actually helps you define your mission or your vision statement and then have objectives, strategies, and tactics against each one of them. And it helps you drill down into what you need to do to achieve your vision. So for example, in my group, some of the objectives we have are around improving test automation, how we want to improve quality processes, what do we want to do in terms of enabling teams to look at metrics and so on. And then for each of those, you want to have strategies. So for example, for test automation, our strategy could have been, we are going to decommission a previous framework. What are the steps we need to do will go under tactics, which are your actual Jira stories that you can think of, which you put into a roadmap and then visualize it as a Jira board. Another important thing to do is that, and I started doing this more recently, and we actually have a stand-up after this talk to discuss that just creating the tickets is not enough. You want to make sure that you're enabling your team to talk about the updates and also making sure that they're involved in trying to get us to a better position. Sometimes we want to articulate, let's say for test automation, for quality processes, one of the things we wanted to do was to visualize functional coverage, which is really hard to do via tooling. So it was going to be a manual process of the team going through a set of capabilities that we're delivering for our customer and actually go through the code base to iron out, okay, this capability is being covered in so and so test, and then visualize where our percentage functional coverage is. But then another step on that was that the team came up with an idea of, yes, we're going to actually implement a decorator to indicate our functional test coverage in our code, so we don't have to do this manual task. So it was just, I would think it was just a very beautiful way of making a tedious process easier. And that came because of the team being feeling that they are enabled to improve on the strategies that we're implementing as long as the objectives and the mission are clear. The most difficult part of management, I think, is about how you build a team. And I have to say, I have made my mistakes and I'm still learning, but there are some things you need to make sure you are thinking of when you're trying to build a team. You want to look at that your team is building the right thing. And then you want to look at that the team is building the thing right. And then you want to look at how you're building the right organization for it. Before going into how we will technically implement a solution, which is about building the thing right, you want to look at that you're building the correct pieces for the organization or for the client. You want to have a detailed understanding of what you're building over how you're going to build it. For example, if you want to build a true end-to-end testing framework, you don't want to go into the detail of, oh, we don't have this tooling. Stop thinking about that. Step back and think about what is it that will bring value if we build this the right thing. The next thing is then thinking about the tooling. For example, we want to implement automated quality gates. Now, having quality gates is a very basic piece in the testing world, but then you want to make sure how you enable your team to drive decisions on implementing them automatically. Why we want to do it automatically? Because we want to have true CI/CD in the long run, so we can do releases anytime. Something I've also learned is that, and as I just said, busyness is something which is awful for your team. It actually creates a lot of context switching, and the true value of testers or QA engineers is really in how they can actually have the brain width to think about how a customer would use the product. And when you have so many, say, patch releases or so on, you're losing that context or that richness of thought which you can actually bring in, which is to the detriment of making sure that you're building the right framework. So look into how you can actually help your team to automate themselves out of some of the mundane processes, so they actually have the time to think about these problems. And the last thing is, it's very important to think about, and this is something a dear friend of mine said to me once, is that what types of people do you want in your team? And I talk about diverse teams here, not in terms of gender, but mostly in terms of thought and background. You want people, so I work in a fintech, and a lot of people say, yes, it's really useful to have fintech background, but then it's also useful to have people who've, say, worked in organizations where they've done 10 releases in a day. What did they do to improve quality automatically? You want to have a diversity of background, diversity of teams they've worked in, diversity of thought process, and so on. And that really is what helps a team work well together. You want to have people who have really good influencing powers. You want to have people who are really good technically. If you start, the challenge in hiring is that, and this is a very proven exercise, that people always hire people who are like themselves. And this is a bias you should be very aware of when you're doing hiring. And when you actually find people who, say, are better than you, which is what you should always try and do anyway, you actually not only learn from them, you're also raising the talent bar in the team, but also make sure that when you're hiring people who are smarter, say, than the current group of people in your team, they also have challenges in front of them that they can help fix, and not only fix your problems. So it's a two-way street when it comes to this. Something I do more of now is, it's very important to think about how you're prioritizing your work in your teams. This is Eisenhower's matrix, which is used in lots of management courses and so on. Whenever I have too many tasks, as you can see on my post-its, although I'm not using the matrix there, it's very good to use this box to try and put, okay, these are the many tasks. What is it that I need to look into now? What is it that I can look into next week? What are the things that I can actually delegate? And I've realized that things which come in the do it later stack are always the ones which actually get delegated or scrapped, because it's just not as important. They may have been important yesterday or last month, but actually they're not that important in the long run. I would really, really encourage everybody to try and use this, even if you're not a manager, because this is something which helps you be very focused on what you want to try and achieve day to day. This is something which is extremely important for me, and I've learned this in the past 2 years of my management time. Showing vulnerability as a manager is extremely important. When I see vulnerability in a leader, it's what makes the leader human for me. I actually had a very personal challenge for myself, which I actually spoke about in TestCon last year. And I realized I was in two minds at the time when I went through it. I was still in probation and my current role. And I was of the view that, if I share this personal challenge, will it impact my review? Will it impact my team? Will people see me as weak? But then I actually thought that it's very important to bring my whole self to work, because that's what makes me valuable in the organization, hopefully. So what I did was I actually shared my concerns with my manager, and then I one by one went through my entire team and actually shared it with them. And what was beautiful as a result of this was that I did not feel weak. I felt the empowering energy from my team, which I still do to today. And it's extremely humbling when you see that you're sharing that you are struggling as a person sometimes, and it is okay to struggle. So if they're struggling, they feel comfortable about sharing their struggles with yourself. Something that we did as a result, and something this was recommended to me as part of my external group of peers, was to run a team psychological safety exercise. You hear of these terms a lot, but there's a lot of value in doing small things like this. This is Emily Weber's team manual. You can find it online. It's an exercise we did for my team because there were lots of new hires coming in, and we wanted to look at how we want to work together as a team. And you can only work together as a team, especially in these difficult times, when you know what other people are like. We don't have the body language to deal with right now. We can't see each other face to face. It's so weird when you interview someone on video, and then when you see them in person, you're like, oh, I had a different vision of how you would be in person, and so on. So we went through this team manual where everybody spoke about things like, what is it that I like to work in? How do I like to receive feedback? What are the timings I like to work in? An example of some things I learned was that half of my team are early risers. They're the morning team, as we like to call them. So they work really well in the morning. And some people, like myself, work really well in the afternoon, and I don't mind what hours I'm working till, because that's just how my brain works. So we very quickly learned to adapt to each other's working times. I actually told the team that I don't like morning meetings, so I try and shift my schedule accordingly. Other things that we learned were that some of the people who were team jesters were actually the ones who really shy. So they hate doing public speaking or anything. They're really good on one-to-one interactions. So that's how we learned to work with them. Some people didn't like to be pointed out to in the team channel because I was waiting for some feedback. And it is my fault that sometimes I forget to do that as well. But then it also creates the opportunity that if we all agree to work in a certain manner, then we can actually call each other out for that. And that's what I actually really, really enjoyed. I feel, and I hope my team felt the same way as well, that once we did this exercise, as if it was like a retrospective hour we did, the team's energy changed so quickly after that. The way we work together, the banter, the support. Like right now, my team has a lot of new babies. So we're very supportive of each other in that scenario. We bring the kids online, and, it's just really nice to have that sense of camaraderie. But it also comes at not at the expense, but we're very careful also to make sure that whereas we're very comfortable, we're also very responsible for the output that is expected of us from it. So I would encourage everybody to try and coax their managers, that if you are a manager or a leader, to try and run this exercise. And I'd be very interested to know what feedback came from it. In the end, what I would like to say is that when you're bringing a team, when you're hiring them, it's just the beginning, and they are learning to work together, and you slowly start making progress. But the real success for a team comes when you are actually working together towards a shared goal. You're working together to help each other, to elevate each other, to help each other move forward. And that's where the true success of working in a team comes. I really hope that I've been able to share some experiences and some useful insights into how you can actually get joy from managing and leading teams. And I do hope that some of you want to embark on that journey, because the industry is lacking in really good managers. Thank you, everyone. How do you integrate natural introverts into team collaboration? Being an introvert myself, I offer better output benefiting all parties through me, minimizing my interactive group collaboration. So this is something I've also really struggled with myself. I'm a natural extrovert, but there are people in my team who are introverts. I think the team collaboration piece is I nudge them sometimes in a team setting that X, what are your thoughts on this? Which is something introverts completely hate. I know that, but I feel sometimes you do need to speak up, and that's where the power of being an introvert is, because they speak less, but they say amazing things. I do try and get more information out of them in my one-to-ones rather than in a team setting, because that's what they do best. There is a book which was recommended by Linda Rising called Quiet. It talks about how to work with introverts. I have yet to read that book, but I would recommend that you look into working with them in a one-to-one setting more than in a team collaboration. Another mistake I've seen is that a lot of people sometimes make introverts team managers. That's a very downhill road. I think you should speak to your team to talk about what progression they want to do, and if they're actively looking at becoming managers, then that's exactly what you should try and make them support them to do, and not push them into roles that they're not comfortable doing. What tips do you have for someone wanting to move from hands-on testing to management? This is the biggest risk I took in my career. I was a hands-on tester, and I really wanted to go into management because I felt like I wanted to provide direction and create strategies. I think if you don't have the role available in the organization, the things you can do are start small in terms of creating test strategies and roadmaps in your smaller cohort, and then use that as examples of how you can actually progress into management. Management is a beast in its own, and I think in order to get into it, you actually need good sponsors. I was very fortunate that the place I interviewed at, I actually had good examples of challenges where I did hiring, where I took on bigger tasks which were outside of my hands-on testing remit in the role I was in. And that's the examples I used when I went to that interview. And my managers at the time in the new role, I'm very, very fortunate that they were very supportive and really helped me build my career into what it is today and help me mold into it. So I would say, yeah, start small, start creating visions, and, do those things I mentioned. And then that could hopefully feed into what you can do as a manager going forward. Next question, how do you manage expectations, with senior management work-wise, and balance between work-oriented and people-oriented with your team members, especially in pressure situations? It's interesting you've asked that, Mihir, because that's exactly what I'm going through right now. Balancing work pressure is an art, I think, in every role, not only as a manager, because you have pressure you want to do upwards management and you're doing downwards management. I'll talk about my current situation. Upwards management, current situation is I have to come up with engineering metrics for the entire organization, and the CEO's eyes are on it. Downward management is that we have a release in flight and we have a client who is a little bit upset, so I need to just change my strategy on how we're going to do testing for that client. And it also includes parallel management, where my peers are asking for people to be working on all of that. So you can imagine it involves a lot of meetings. What you want to do is that you actually want to dedicate time in your day. What I sometimes do is I actually introduce fake meetings in my calendar, or I actually reject meetings just so that I have that thinking time. And it's always good to have a list of items that you need to work on, and then use the Eisenhower matrix to help prioritize. But let's say you have 2 tasks which say, do it now. In situations like this is where delegation becomes really important. And this is something I suffered from a lot. I wasn't good at delegating initially. And this is something which I realized through a lot of management courses, and a lot of other people also said to me that you take a lot of things on yourself rather than using your team. Because what was happening was that I was empathetic towards their workload, but that came at the detriment of my workload. So you just need to work together on understanding how you want to make sure that you're working through this. I hope that helps. How does the role of a QA manager transform in the context of an agile environment? Very interesting question. Many companies don't have QA managers. Many companies look at having engineering managers or tech leads, and they manage the QA people. I myself know that if a redundancy comes tomorrow in the organization, my role will get scrapped. And it's a very hard pill to swallow. Not that the company doesn't see my value, but a lot of people bring far more value than my role, I think. I think it's important here to know that it's good to have multiple skill sets under your hood at that time, which will help you. Something I've done before and I'm very happy to do even now is release management, which is something which will never go from an organization. And then this public speaking stint is something I really enjoy as well, which is why I feel like I think the industry is turning around a little bit in terms of understanding the true value of QAs. When I speak to the likes of Linda Rising and Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory, I do see people are turning around to now having traditional QAs in the team, because there is the power that they bring, which is about understanding how a client is using your tool. And that's something which is very important as well. I think you're online because we are out of time and there's still 1 million questions to answer. Is that right? Do we have a break after this?
No, we have a continuous, speaker next, waiting for coming to stage.
Oh, okay, fine. I do want to answer these questions.
Definitely, I can give you a spare 2-3 minutes if you can just quickly huddle them up.
Okay, fine. What has been your biggest success? What tip can you share? You want to enter a QA lead role? No course, I wouldn't say. Management career. I think management career is not something you should start with. It is very taxing. I would say focus on being technically capable first. A mistake I made was that I did not spend enough time being very technical, spot on, and that's how I ended up building more strategic and managerial style of skill set. So I would say if you want to be in the technical industry, make sure you are working on your technical skill set first. How to handle conflicting ideas. This is a very long conversation. What is a decision-making framework regarding what to delegate and what you want to do it when? Okay, so for that, you should use the Eisenhower matrix. Just trying to see. Okay, how to change mindsets. This is where influencing is a big part of your managing career. Say my CEO is not interested in doing unit testing. Let's just say that. How do you influence them? And this is where you need to really understand what are the tools that you can use. Read about influencing, because this is something which will really help you in the long run. A big part of influencing comes with data. I think, let's say your CEO says, no, I'm not going to allow you time to write unit tests, which we know is a bad exercise. But then you want to prove it not by statements, but by data that, let's say, this is how much longer it will take us to sign off a release. This is the number of defects we could have found earlier, and this is the waste that you've introduced in the process. Numbers speak to those people who are not managers and are not very happy with let's say, not in agreement with your mindset going forward. And I think last question, apologies if I've not answered all of the questions. Please ping me on LinkedIn or Twitter and I will speak to you. Biggest success as a manager, I think, has been when I still remember the day when I said to my team that I've had a very serious panic attack. And they turned around and said, please go home. We have everything under control. This is when you know that you've hired people and not just testers. And this is why I took the management role, because I wanted to work with people. Everything else becomes secondary. I feel it's really important to be a humane leader and a morally sound leader in a team before you encourage people to do anything else. Because when people see that, they actually try and work well with you.